Joshua, you are the author of at least one book, a novel titled Demons of Eminence. And that's kind of where my knowledge of you stops. You're one of the few people who I've had on this conversation series who I don't have any real relationship with, except that you
Yeah.
share a publisher with my friend James Nolick, who I maintain is
Mhm.
one of my favorite prose stylists.
Yes.
Your publisher
Yeah.
reached out to me to ask if I would read your book and consider interviewing you, and I don't have a great reason. I don't have a great reason as to why I said yes, other than that I love the title, Demons of Eminence. That said, I was blown away by your book, and I consider it to be one of the most lived in and contemporary feeling novels I've encountered in recent years. What I mean by that is that I don't think Demons of Eminence could exist at any other period of history. It's a COVID era novel, but that description sells it entirely too short. I'm going to read the summary from your publisher's website because it's much better than anything I could come up with. At least it's more succinct.
Yes.
In Demons of Eminence, a young travel nurse and self-described cum dump observes and sanctifies the friendship between an aging gay porn star and a goth chola dropout half his age, one that leads to them throwing endless parties in the industrial scrublands of SoCal's Inland Empire at the height of the pandemic. I hope it's not out of line for me to assume the travel nurse and self-described cum dump is loosely based on you.
That's fair to say. That's fair to say.
Okay.
Yeah, my editor came up with that wonderful description. And it was funny because I started sending the link to my friends,
Uh-huh.
having read the summary. And then once it was out in the world, I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. But it was really funny. I mean, I like to be a little edgy. And when it came to this book, I kind of just wanted to really write for my gay people, like my gay friends. Like I really wanted them to read it and them to be excited. So I'm talking about my gay friends like in DC, Washington, DC, where I spent 2 months, Mexico City, where I also studied recently and just fell in love with the place.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was really surprising being in both those places, because it really catapulted the novel. So in DC, I kind of fell in with the nightlife and with drag queens there, and I was blown away by how undefeated and spirited the gay professionals were. And that was missing. I felt that was missing from my life. So I kind of fell in with like drag queens there. And then in Mexico City, the same thing kind of happened where I was fortunate enough to study there. I studied Spanish at UNAM, actually, the Autonomous University of Mexico.
Okay.
So
Are you
I
not?
thought
Where are you from originally?
I'm from the Inland Empire.
Oh, you
Yeah.
are from the Inland Empire. So
I'm
it's
so
like
I'm from, yeah.
so you went to you left and then you came back. So when you're talking about being in DC and in Mexico, this is all pre 2020 or
This is after 2020, after COVID
okay.
ended. So
Okay.
yeah, I wrote the novel over the past like year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. I finished it in December. I started it a year or so before that. And I had a very generous editor. His name is Matthew Stadler, who
Okay.
um I kind of didn't write anything for the first 6 months. I really struggled. And at first, the novel actually took shape as like a Mexicanized version of The Last of Us. It was like really bad.
Like a zombie novel?
Yeah, it was a
Amazing.
zombie novel. It was a zombie novel. It was a post-apocalyptic zombie novel. And my editor, and my good friend Roberto Tejada,
Yeah.
they urged me to write about the Inland Empire because that's where I'm from. It's very dear to my heart. This is actually my second book. So my first book was a collection of poetry,
Okay.
called Bareback Nightfall, and in the that came out during the pandemic. So like 3 months into it, so it felt really weird promoting it. Um, and that book is also about a doctor and a DJ. But it was poetry, and I would read it to my friends, and it kind of, I mean, they liked it, but it just felt like a little out of place at like the parties I was going to. I go to a lot of warehouse parties, uh,
Sure.
circuit parties. I love EDM. And so I really wanted a novel that kind of that embraced those communities, but at the same time was not like a fetish novel or indulgent in like thinking about or gratuitous and like thinking about drugs and stuff.
Hold on. Let me stop you 1 second before you, because I think you're about to answer this question, but I want to provide a little more context to what this novel is, because I didn't actually finish my first question, but I love
Oh,
what you're
sorry.
saying so far. Uh, it makes a lot of sense, and I think this will make even more sense in a minute. Because the structure of your book is really interesting, and that the point of view of your narrator weaves between extremely personal details of work, attending sex parties, and so on to a kind of omnipotent presence in the lives of other people, like a God who oversees these central characters who live at the edge of society and yet whose experiences and actions feel entirely natural and obvious in the context of the book. And that's the overarching charm of this novel. In less deft hands, writing a scenario in which a young goth girl decides to start an OnlyFans account for an aging gay porn star, both to help him out and give herself a sort of summer job, would come off as novelty or a seedy attempt at transgressive literature. In your book, this feels more like the documentation of a specific cultural moment and a rather sweet exploration of intergenerational friendship. So you've sort of already said this, but I was beginning to ask, like, what is your relationship to this world and this story? More than most books I read, this feels so much like a part of someone's lived experience.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that it is fiction. What's
It
really
is.
cool that it is I really wanted to embrace these communities. So I would go to like bars in Zona Rosa. There was a
Is
bear
that in
bar
the Inland
in
Empire?
Mexico in Mexico City.
Okay, sorry.
I
I'm
attended
my
these,
I'm
sorry,
geographically
my
skewed.
mind is a little just in general a little scattered, but um I really wanted to embrace these worlds and be like, why, if I'm writing about gay shit, why do I have to like filter myself a little bit? But then it's just like it's a real world of difference. So me and my friends joke as we were walking to SMD, this party in Los Angeles. We were just like, straights could not fathom the lives that gay people will for themselves. And
All right.
it's pretty marvelous. And I get so much out of it, but at the same time, it seems like it's not like literary territory, except if you go into like documentary, you
Hmm.
know, and once you go to documentary or of course music videos, it's more at home, it's more comfortable. So I really, really wanted to engage it, but I wanted to write about someone beside myself, so a goth chola, but I also wanted to give them like this beautiful artistic life, one that would be almost impossible to live in the Inland Empire, which is a region 2 hours east of LA, for those of you who don't know. But I was on a book tour recently, and it turns out there's another Inland Empire in Portland.
You're
There's a
kidding.
called,
Okay.
yeah, it's not to be
All
confused
right, all right.
outside Seattle, so in Southern California. And in my life, time, there were no warehouses when I was born. Now there's over 1 billion square feet of warehouses there. And it's been called the shipping supercenter of the world.
Right.
So that was one of the reasons actually for writing this novel, as I wanted to draw attention to it. But I wanted to do it in a way that could be celebrated or, ex that would excite like my friends and other people who go to like EDC or, you know, those kinds of things. So, and in those communities, there's such a beautiful intelligence and perspectives on life. There's kind of like this wonderful plurality of like being at a party and, the way that you flick your hair can be political. The way if you wear a dress, it could be really radical. And the creativity and the thinking and the sincerity are just through the roof. And so I'm like, why don't I bring those aesthetics? Like of like maybe a Charlie XCX after party, queer after party. And I tried to make a novel on that. And so I really wanted to give these characters what would ideal artist life look like in the Inland Empire. But yeah, it's if you it, but they throw parties and I they make it look easy. I was a
Right.
party planner. I did that in college. I stepped down after like 2 months because the parties get chaotic. But I like going to them. But so they end up making their own fun and so I'm really happy to kind of create this fantasy version of the Inland Empire, rather than trying to just document it and capture it and kind of, I'm not a journalist,
Right.
even though I did get a graduate degree in journalism. I'm a fiction writer, and I could make up my own Inland Empire.
That's
Uh,
kind of beautiful. I'm actually kind of shocked that this isn't based on like a real scenario, but I mean, I think that's amazing. Uh, it really feels like that. And yet it's still kind of a wonderful novel despite that.
Yeah, I know. I do go to parties,
I would assume
what kind of
that.
parties? But I like going out, and it's just those experiences have totally changed my world. And at the same time, like it's really cool to have like this little trio of the nurse, the
Yeah.
goth cola, and the aging porn star, and they formed their own little family during COVID, and the family as much as they would want it. It's maybe more like a band.
Yeah.
My friend Roberto Tejada actually says he thought the title of the book refers to like a made-up band, maybe one of the bands that are featured in the novel.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Because a big part of this book is based around a Southern California party scene, mostly gay or queer or whatever adjective you want to assign. But there's a heavy dose of both the connection and dissociation that often accompanies the experience of existing with other people under the influence of sex, drugs, and music. And I want to first talk about music, as this book's table of contents is essentially a playlist.
Mhm.
You designate chapters with song titles. For example, chapter 2 is Crime Wave by Crystal Castles, chapter 6, Ghosts Again by Depeche Mode. Then, underneath each chapter heading, so to speak, you list an additional batch of songs. Do you suggest your readers prime themselves with the music you've suggested, or what is the significance of organizing your novel this way?
I struggled with chapter titles, and in my first book, I actually created like a playlist in the with poetry, but I scrapped the song titles of different songs, so I remixed them. Like Bjork, there was like a Bjork song, um, but for this book. These people throw parties during the pandemic, and if you tell anyone that, they're going to be shocked. Just like if you're like, if you tell someone I'm a cum dump, they're going to be shocked and probably offended most people. But if you call someone a whore, that's like totally fine. So I'm interested in that. But with um, so moving past the point of shock and then actually being in their own world, like that music does that for us, right?
Sure.
Like it creates the world as we would like to live in and inhabit. Um, and so when it comes to these chapters, I would love for people to listen to this music. Some of the bands actually that I in the Inland Empire, I went back and my friend Janet, who's a filmmaker, she's really amazing. After having moved away from the Inland Empire, I moved back and she introduced me to like the whole underground DIY band scene. So some of the bands in the book are also on the playlist, and I featured them.
Okay.
It's a little
I wasn't even aware of that
yeah.
explicitly. I just was like, maybe I've not heard of that or something.
No, those descriptions are all made up, but they're all based off of like the band nights I would go to with my friend. I was very
Got it.
fortunate to fall in with them, but the um I would love for people to listen to the playlist and then read the book or listen as they're reading. It's a 3 hour playlist, but the songs came together because they really helped me overcome different obstacles in the book. Like these people are partying in the pandemic, as crazy as that sounds. And I was like, how could I write about this without sounding like an ass or like reckless or crazy? And at the same time, I felt like it was real. Like these, this is real. This is these stuff like this actually happened. I would have liked to have done that maybe during the pandemic. But the song, as I was like struggling and with it, I was in the back of a cab in Mexico City, and the song "Come As You Are" by Nirvana came on, and then
Okay.
I was like, oh, like, and it took me to the place where I could really write. Um, and then there's a number of songs by Smiling Beth. There's 2 songs, and those were really cool um, epiphanies for me of like of the emotional epiphanies of like saying goodbye to these characters or not getting too attached to the book as I'm making it and being trying to be open to kind of their realizations. Because I have a hard time writing like epiphanies. Like even now, like if I were to I'm trying to write a nonfiction book about the queer nightlife in Mexico City and Los Angeles. It's really hard. I'm struggling. Like to what do I actually want to state in like kind of plain English? But
Sure.
like so the songs really help me kind of inhabit the spaces and the realities and fantasies. But also, I think there's an edge to that music has where you live it. Like a rock star or a performer. They live their music and how they dress and how they act in a way. And I think that I love that energy and I want to bring it. So I try to bring that into my writing as well. Um,
I love
yeah.
that. Well, all right, let's move on to the next question. Let's talk a bit about representations of sexuality in your book. I think we can definitively call this a queer novel, and yet it escapes a lot of the trappings that word or categorization has come to define in mainstream literature over the past, let's say, 20 years. This is my opinion, but I think there has been a certain corniness attached to quote unquote queer culture as mainstream media has worked to incorporate ideas like inclusivity into its ethos. But in your novel, your narrator describes himself as a cum dump and regularly attends sex parties even while he works a hospital job in the middle of a pandemic. One of the central characters in the book, Ray, an aged out gay porn star, is labeled as a loser in the first chapter, and many of the descriptions of his life point to his near poverty, his emotional stuntedness, and behavior that puts him in perpetual danger of being canceled by college students more sensitive to the language deemed appropriate by progressive ideology. And yet you write with tremendous empathy towards your characters. As I've mentioned before, the novel feels entirely lived in, and so your prose, or at least the world it invokes, comes off as much more relatable than other material I've read on what might be considered similar subject matter. I almost feel stupid asking this, but are you conscious of the ways you write or represent a character who is, say, a sex worker, in lieu of the fact that there are so many cultural narratives around what that person or identity should look like in a piece of literature, film, or TV show? Or are you just trying to write your best novel and this doesn't fucking matter? Or do you have any thoughts on this at all?
Well, I first want to ask you how many questions do you have? Because I could be long-winded and I want to make sure I get through
I
all.
have two more, but I mean, if we don't get to them all and you just want to focus on this, that's totally fine.
Well, yeah, so the novel it takes place in the Inland Empire and a guy finds himself there after the pandemic, having moved from Los Angeles. And he makes quick friends with these 2 really cool people. One is a really amazing artist, kind of understated artist, who's a
Right,
goth chola. And she lives her art. Like everything that she kind of does is like kind of fantastic in her own way. And I had a lot of fun writing that. And then there's Ray,
right.
who's the aged out porn star. I think a lot about this. I do think it's there's a lot of corniness out there But I think people are really trying. Like people are really trying, and as an artist, you're like, I want to do this and I want to make a difference. And so, but what also arises are then there's certain models for how to do it. And then those models can be gate kept, you know? Like if I tell my coworkers I'm gay, it's like great, or but it's one thing to be it, and then it's another thing to kind of be embraced and to be celebrated and supported. And so when it comes to like representation, I think it could be really powerful just to be to go for the fantasy of like, hey, I'm an artist with a pen. I want to make this fantasy world that does draw on reality in significant ways. And I do think about representation of sex workers and trans community, and I wanted to have a really inclusive novel, but to see people for being their whole person. Like I struggle to from my existence is a struggle. Like how we express ourselves is a struggle. Even like my science friends, like they'll have a waking day where they're like, oh my God, like how I dress, like I could express myself in these ways. And, we listen to EDM and it's this waterfall. So I think, for other artists, I would say it's exciting to explore your characters. It is like
Or
one of the greatest gifts, that we have as writers. It's a real treat. It's like, hey, like this is this goth chola. This is her existence. The more I explore it, the it's so joyous and it's so amazing and there's all these layers and shit, she's really cool. She's really fucking cool. And I think however you can get there as an artist is essential because we have these narratives about how gay people should be. But then we've seen how quickly it all falls away when we have a new president. And all the corporations have gone. But it's just like, hey, who's really with you? Who
right.
really supports you? And so it's cool to have like this kind of intimate, sincere kind of circle of people. And I did want to write about from a woman's perspective, and I wanted to write also about Asian gay porn star, because to explore certain fantasies, but also come to terms with the realities of any line of work. And I think too try to reach for other writers, try to reach a certain level of horizontalness or equality, like real equality, which is could be really messy. And I even when I wrote my first book, so my evil plan is to write a book in every genre. So I
Right.
wrote a book of poetry. This is my fiction, and now I'm working on nonfiction. And then eventually I would like to write a screenplay. I would love for this to be a fucking A24 film. I
Fuck
think they
yeah.
would love it. But
Fuck yeah.
yeah, I need to maybe I'll mail them some books one day. But it's exciting to get to these places. And the more we think about like life in this way through novels, it's just like, oh my God, like there's all these dimensions, and um and so with my first book, when I was telling people about it, I was like, hey, I wanted to write a poetry book, but it's going to be about a DJ, and he has no fucking clue about the HIV epidemic or what it was. Like this is going to be in the near future, like for like
I
2016.
kind of love that.
Yeah.
Also, can I just say, like, you are such you are such a joyous presence. A lot of, I mean, I love talking to all writers on this thing, but your excitement is really contagious. Anyway, continue.
Well, it's just writing is really exciting. I'm just knowing that you enjoyed the book and the things that you're saying about it. It's like, oh shit, he fucking gets it. Yeah, you enjoyed it and dope.
Okay, good.
Oh, it's mutual, my friend. But I think that so when I told people, hey, I want to write a book about a guy that doesn't get HIV, like safe sex practices, like mean nothing to him. And I would tell people that and they would be offended. Like some,
Right.
I'm not just random people, like my friends are like, and I'm not necessarily calling out my friends in my, no, but I would express it to people and I would be like, hey, I'm writing this book. And they're like, what? Why would you ever write about someone like that? They're an idiot. You know, like, oh, I guess I'm writing a book about an idiot.
No, I mean, I fucking love that. I mean,
Yeah.
no, I found this really refreshing. I mean, I'm guessing you don't know anything about me because I'm not a big deal, but I used to do porn and I was a full service sex worker. And I, I don't, actually, your book is an exception because a lot of people will send me things and be like, well, I'm writing like a sex worker novel. I don't want to read it because the majority of people who reach out to me like that have kind of like a political agenda that destroys the reality of their characters, and I feel like it makes it worse. And this just felt so like this is a human being, and in despite like even the whole narrative, which is not a big, well, it is kind of a big part of the story that he was, I mean, he's gay, but he had a relationship with a woman, and he has this son out there who died, and it's kind of like this underpinning sadness of his life while he's having all these extraordinary experiences with these people, and like that's really powerful. I really appreciated that. So just to say say that out loud to you.
I'm so excited for people to read it because it has all these surprises.
Right.
And one of the things that my editor said, he really likes how the book changes subject matter like
Sure.
every chapter. Like
Sure. You're
the
right.
book goes in one direction and it goes another. And for me, I could call myself a novelist now. I fucking love that. And like, but it does, yeah. So the book is about grieving and it's about loss and these deeper humanities that kind of ground us and tragedy too.
Sure.
And I struggled a lot with these characters because in different ways. So with Elena, it was like, how the fuck is she supporting herself? You know, because if you're an artist in the
Yeah,
inland,
sure. Yeah.
like you're living off of hopes and dreams. Like
Right.
there is next to no support. I feel, maybe others feel differently, but I do feel like, artists are not are not supported. People are like, we love artists, but it's hard to support anyone, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my struggle with Elena. And then with Ray, I was like, I really do not want this to be exploitative. But then again, I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't say I know a lot about the reality of sex work. I think it's really interesting. I think it's fascinating even, and I'll say that. But I'm like, but I want to write about the reality of it and too. Like, and so I once it helped that he is a aged out porn star, so he's not actively working.
Right.
That part, I feel like I couldn't, hit the nail on the head on that one because I that would be really beyond reach for me, I think. But I think that what it boiled down to is it is another line of work. And
Yeah.
it's an intimate line of work where you're working close, working on top inside other people. And as fun as that sounds, and I'm sure it is, like it could be really cool. Um, I don't also have to have this like moralistic undertow to any of it. And it could just be reality. And I'm like, oh, this is just his reality. This is how he lived his life.
Right.
So I once I got there with that character, I felt like I was able to really write. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Well, I'm gonna move on to the next question because we only have 10 minutes and you're killing it. But if we don't get to all of them, it's okay. This is an important question though. So okay, I finally looked you up and realized this is not your first book, which you've already mentioned, and I've written down big surprise. This definitely doesn't feel like a first novel. It's much too complex for that. Anyway, you've written a number of acclaimed chat books and won the
Oh, Houston Prize, yeah.
Bo Houston Prize for Demons of Eminence. So it's obvious you've been doing this for a little while. Maybe you can talk a bit about your literary career, what writers influenced you, and how you ended up publishing with Fellow Traveler series.
Yeah, so I studied at Bard College
Okay.
in their MFA program, and then I also studied at UC Berkeley in their journalism program. And the Bard program changed my life. And I did both of them at the same time because one was a summer program.
Oh, whoa.
So it was, I mean, it's a lot. Looking back, I'm like, how did I do all that work? But I couldn't really express myself as a journalist, and I kind of felt that after one semester of journalism school. It was a fine program, but I knew I didn't want to do it after I started it. Oh, geez. But the Bard program was really cool because we studied alongside visual artists in different disciplines. So it was really cool because it's like, you know, literary, if you took this book to a bookstore, like some people might be like, ew, gross,
Right, right.
and but if you took it to like a cool bookstore, they would be like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. So I feel like the it was nice to study at Bard because it was very much that fuck yeah, awesome vibe. Where um like I like to be fully transparent, like I went in and I was like, literature has to be accessible. And then by the end of it, wrote experimental novel or experimental poetry collection, or at least the makings of it, about a DJ who falls in love with a doctor in a world where there's no difference between nightlife and day to day. It's a fantasy world. Um, and so after Bard, I lived in New York and worked part-time as an adjunct instructor at four different schools in two states. And then I was like, man, I'm traveling so far, I might as well move back to the Inland Empire. And I did. During before the pandemic, I moved back and I lived with my parents briefly. And then I moved out to Santa Barbara, where I'm now a professor, a community college professor.
Oh,
Uh,
shit.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks. I teaching it can be very hard, and
Believe that.
my students are fantastic, and I love teaching writing. But and so what I'll say is writing is extraordinarily hard practice to kind of maintain. And some big influences of mine, one I have to say is like Roberto Tejada, who is a visual artist, visual arts scholar,
Okay.
dude. He's really cool. He's based out of Houston, and in his prose, he has like this extraordinary mind. This guy was an editor at one of Octavio Paz's arts magazines, very and was his amanuensis at one point, like very brilliant scholar, and he kind of writes about um, Mexican art and Chicano culture, but in a way that's very abstract and surreal. And it's so cool how he incorporates technology and history. So that actually helped me kind of be like, hey, like, even though I'm like a Mexican American author, I don't have to write into these other narratives. Other people can, but I can be my own John Ritchie. And it's a shame that John Ritchie is not have a higher. He doesn't get as much credit as he does.
You know,
He's kind
I don't even know who that is. I'm so sorry.
Oh, so John Recchi. No, that's totally cool. You have lots of treasures waiting for you.
Okay.
He wrote the first Chicano novel, and it's a gay novel. It's a epic
Okay.
about hustling. And he was a hustler, and it's all about all this sex stuff. So the first Chicano novel is written by John Recchi. That he's a big influence, obviously, on me. And then there's another novelist, Marguerite Yourcenar, who wrote Memoirs of Hadrian,
Okay.
changed my life. And it's actually being turned into a TV series by a European outfit. And I'm really excited because I think it's going to be like a cool counter narrative to kind of the gladiatorial depiction of ancient Rome that we see.
Okay.
Um, and it was translated into English by her life partner. Um, and that's an amazing novel. I think I really love Camus and Kafka. I need to read more Kafka, but I fucking love those little crazy stories. It kind of gives me permission to kind of go extreme places. But then I also have to say, Chris Marker is probably my biggest influence, and he's a documentarian. But he would write fictional lives of people and fictional letters,
I
and
love
then
this. Everyone you're telling me about, I've never heard of. So this is kind of great.
this is my cosmology. This is my syllabus of like
Good,
Josh Land.
good.
But Chris Marker is really amazing in how his observations and his writing on Japan and um, the he wrote about Africa as well, um, the Bijago Islands, and it's these kind of like surreal, mind-bendy, expansive authors have had a big influence on me. Chris Marker is really, I can't recommend that more highly. I think that's a kind of, that has to be on a syllabus of like, hey, if you're going to be an EDC influenced artist or EDM, electronic music, uh, and you want dope ass music and influences, Chris Marker has to be on that list. His movie Sans Soleil. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's those artists are really cool. And
Amazing. Well, we are getting to the 2 minute mark. Should we is there anything coming up that you want to pitch or just I mean everyone should buy Demons of Eminence. I can at least give that recommendation. Everything else you've talked about, it seems interesting. And
yeah,
you're currently working on something.
yeah. I'm working on a book of essays, short essays about queer nightlife in Los Angeles and Mexico City. It's taking all kinds of directions and it's very much a work in progress. It'll probably take me a couple years to
That's
finish. But
that's probably
it's
appropriate. Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, it's exciting. But for one of the essays, I want to write about like Honey Dijon and John Summit, and
Okay.
yeah, so those are really amazing like DJs that are kind of really radical in their music. And for Honey Dijon, they're trans, and she did a couple songs for Beyonce. So like. That's kind of my obsession at the moment.
Great. Well, thanks so much for talking with me, Joshua. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, I'll try to have this up actually as soon as possible. It kind of depends on my work schedule, but in a perfect world, it will be this week. Any final words before we part here?
No, I appreciate you, Chris, and it was great
Absolutely.
talking to you. And I look forward to getting to know you more.
Yeah, likewise. Please keep in touch. I'd love that. I think this was a great like introduction to you as a person rather than just your words. So,
Oh, thank
but
you.
I love that part of it as well. All right, man. Well, have a great rest of your day, weekend, week, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Thank you.